Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, professional keynote speaker and collaborative problem solver, Matt Lehrman. Hey, what you drinking? Okay, usually I comment on this later in the conversation, but I'm just going to tell you right now, this is going to be a Colonel E.H. Taylor type conversation. Colonel E.H. Taylor, that's the foundation of my whiskey journey. And this conversation is foundational for me because I'm going to be speaking with someone who I met by happenstance at the beginning of my journey into entrepreneurship, at the beginning of my becoming a speaker, a coach. And this guy has periodically been with me at critical points throughout the journey. And so I'm just really, really excited to bring to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership my good friend, Mr. Matt Lehrman. Matt, welcome to the podcast, man. Come on, and how are you doing?
Thank you, Galen. I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to be with you. And let's just be clear, I met you at the same point of my speaking career as well. So we have done this journey together, and I am grateful to have had someone to share the journey with.
Man, I'll tell you, this has been a conversation that has been in the back of my mind with almost every podcast interview that I've done. I've known that I've needed to have an episode with Mr. Matt Lehrman because, you know, as we've said, we have been with each other throughout this journey. That's actually how I chose the whiskey that I'm going to drink today. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because my listeners know that no matter how excited I am about the upcoming conversation, they don't even pay attention until I ask and get the answer to this question. So here we go. So what you drinking?
Galen, I'm about to pour myself a whiskey that I know has never been poured or drank on your podcast. It is from Scotland, and it is from a store called Demijohn, which bills itself as a liquid delicatessen. And I happened into it on a speaking engagement when I was in Scotland, about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I happened into the store that was filled with these big glass orbs filled with liquids of all different kinds of colors. And they would give you an empty bottle and you would hold it up to the bottom and they would just open up a little valve at the bottom of it and pour the liquid into a bottle that they would wrap up and take home. And so I'm going to show you, I know your listeners can't see this, but I am holding up this little square bottle of Demijohn's finest blended Scotch whiskey from Scotland, 40% alcohol by volume. And that's what I'm going to start with. And then
oh my gosh,
after a little bit of that, I'm going to move on to their toffee whiskey liqueur. An ambrosia of whiskey that I felt so strongly about that last year, I actually went and ordered it to be shipped to me, the most expensive alcohol I have ever purchased in my life, because you pay for the alcohol in the bottle and then you pay for the shipping to come over from Scotland. And this is a beautiful, sweet liqueur with a whiskey base that is just phenomenal. And that puts me in my happy place.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have never, ever had a guest who has gone to such lengths to make the selection and have the audacity to have two on the show. So again, I decided that for this conversation, I need to get foundational. And for me, that foundation is Colonel E.H. Taylor. And Colonel E.H. Taylor used to be one of my everyday. It was literally my everyday. And as you get a little money, you start moving up the chain. You go from their small batch to their barrel proof. And then occasionally you can get to the seasoned oak or some of the higher level things. But the barrel proof became that drink, that bottle that I would keep for only really, really good friends. And then I discovered this Colonel Taylor straight rye. And I found it at a time when I was famous for saying that I don't like rye. But I happened to find this bottle of rye, and I said, well, I've tried everything else from E.H. Taylor. Let me go ahead and get a bottle of rye. And it has now become one of those things that I guard. And I've got to stop. I've got to stop saying I don't like rye, because this is amazing. So I'm going to crack this open, and you can see, Matt, the others can't see, that I've only got like 4 inches of this left, because once this goes, I haven't been able to find this bottle for a good 4 or 5 years. So I get nervous getting below 4 inches for a bottle that I can't find a backup for. But I'm going to do that because this is a foundational element of my collection, and this is a foundational conversation. So let me go ahead and crack this open. Hold on one second. And
It looks absolutely delicious, Galen. Ooh, that much. Wow. Oh my goodness.
And that officially,
I am honored that you have poured so much to join me in this conversation.
That officially puts this bottle below the 3-inch mark. But I am going to enjoy this, because not only is this good juice, but this is going to give me an opportunity to share with my listeners why you have always been one of my favorite compadres, one of my favorite accountability partners. Every time that we have reconnected, it has always been profitable for me to reconnect with you, and hopefully profitable for you as well, because we've kind of been on this journey at the same pace, at the same time, and sharing similar successes. So while I enjoy getting reintroduced to Colonel E.H. Taylor, I would love for you to introduce yourself more fully to our listeners, your background. What did you do before this podcast, and what are you doing now, so that we can get into this conversation?
So Galen, you may or may not know this. You know, I made my career for a long time in nonprofit arts administration. I was the marketing director for a performing arts center that had a museum program. Gosh, way back in 1999, we made the decision to emerge that visual arts program into being a separate museum. So I became the shared services marketing director for the Scottsdale Center for the Performing Arts and the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. And so here I am marketing arts and cultural participation, performing arts, that's theater and music and dance and world music and classical and, you know, everything, and contemporary art. And I made my career at that for a long time. After the events of 9/11, I had an idea to create a nonprofit service organization for all the arts and cultural organizations in the greater Phoenix area. It took 2 years to take that idea to transform it into reality. And in 2003, I became the founding executive director of an independent nonprofit association called Alliance for Audience, which was known to the public as showup.com. And for the next, 10, 11 years, I ran an association whose job was to raise the visibility of all the arts and cultural activities throughout the greater Phoenix region, and we grew it to a statewide association. And I tell you, I never had more fun in my life than being able to represent all the theater, music, dance, art, festivals, science, technology, and cultural attractions throughout the state of Arizona. We went through this incredible decade. I mean, we were founded before Facebook and Twitter, before there were smartphones.
Wow.
Before there was Groupon. We were selling discount tickets online, like the tickets booth in Times Square, New York. And here I was running this little nonprofit that, had this wonderful mission. But during the decade when human communication transformed at perhaps the fastest rate in human history with technology and social media and the like. And by 2012, we had discovered that the technology had overtaken us, and we decided to shut down the nonprofit. We were never capitalized to serve all of that technology. And we were able to shut down in good faith, with everyone knowing what was going on, transparency, kept our integrity. And in 2012, I went out on my own as a consultant, still saying that I know something about how to bring people together, how to create a coalition. And for really ever since then, since 2012, which is 11 years ago, I've been making my way as a consultant. And originally I focused just on nonprofit organizations. And then I thought I would work with for-profit companies. Of course, the language for for-profits are different. They're not about audience development or donor engagement. They're about loyalty and customer engagement. And then about 6 years ago, a good friend of mine, a former city manager for the city of Scottsdale, where I live, he says to me, Matt, cities and towns need the same kind of help, but they just use different language. They talk about civility. They talk about public participation. And I dipped my toe into that water, and the water was warm and inviting. And for the last 6 years, I have immersed, I still do a lot of work in the nonprofit sector, and I'm happy to do it. I love working with nonprofits. But the municipal space, working with leaders of cities and towns, has been incredibly rewarding. And now I spend most of my time leading courageous conversations. And courageous conversations we define as not the courage of the first responder to run towards danger, and not the courage to draw a line in the sand and say, I will fall on my sword this far and no more. In my practice, a courageous conversation is the courage to be open-minded, the courage to bring people together and to say, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction if someone says something that you disagree with, instead of saying, no, you're wrong, instead of correcting them, instead of defending, to take a pause and say the words, tell me more. Help me understand how that position is rational from your perspective. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Doesn't mean that you're acquiescing to anything. It does mean that you're going to show them the respect to listen to their perspective and understand it, and then engage in a conversation that's truly courageous, vulnerable, open, and willing to engage deeply. And so that's why my company is called Social Prosperity Partners, because social prosperity is the wealth that we create when people work together courageously. That's what I've had the privilege of being able to figure out and grow and do over the last, 11 years.
Wow. I mean, you talk about a journey that could not have been designed the way that it has turned out. It's very similar to how you and I met. I was attending my first and quite honestly, my only conference at the National Speakers Association, and trying to find my way. And the conference, one of the sessions is about to begin. One of the main sessions is about to begin. And you go in, kind of meander around, and you're chatting with people before the thing starts, and you and I just started chatting for a little bit. What's your name and where are you from? What do you do? That kind of thing. And so we continue that chat, and we just sit down at the same table. And the speaker says, pick someone at your table, and we're going to go through a couple of activities, and congratulations, that's your new accountability partner. And from that point, you and I just really built on that initial connection. And, my business has grown and matured at various stages. And I think very similar stages existed in your business. And we just seemed to fit to a certain degree, where, again, you couldn't design it. Even if you tried, you couldn't design it like that. So I want to lead this right into.
Let's just also acknowledge that it's not like it was a straight line upward from that moment. And there were plenty of times when you and I would just hop on Zoom together, and we would commiserate about the frustrations and how come, at least for me, How come I'm not getting traction? How come this isn't working for me like I see it working for everyone else? What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And honestly, the ability to have that kind of conversation with someone who is on the journey, not just a friend outside who doesn't get it, but someone who's actually in it. There is something empowering about it. There is something cathartic about it. And most important, you talked about an accountability buddy. I mean, there were times that it was absolutely the only motivation that I had was I knew I was going to be talking to you in a week or whatever. And I know I needed to advance something because I couldn't get back on the call with you and not have done anything.
Likewise. And that really does tie into something that I talk about often, and that is it's important to find people who are on the same journey, that you can tell that they're going in the same direction. They may be farther down the path than you, and therefore someone you might want to enroll as a mentor. They could be behind you, and therefore someone who would benefit from your mentorship. Or they could be alongside of you, struggling with the exact same problems, the exact same questions. I still don't know what I'm going to do, and they don't either. But you guys are in the same situation, and that's what makes for a great accountability partner, because you both know the significance of where you are and why you need to get to the next phase. And so with that, I want to bring this into the conversation, because we've been blessed to have to be able to get through 5 seasons of Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. And I still get a lot of people ask me, what's with the name? What's with Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership? And folks know that I like all 3 literally, but I also like the metaphor. And I like to ask my guests to help me articulate the metaphor of what this means to them. So for me, the metaphor of whiskey is, just as I described earlier, finding your crew, finding those people that are on the same path, and doing those things that you enjoy with your crew, irregardless of what people outside of your crew have to say about it. You know, whether they like it or not, whether they get it or not, it really doesn't matter. Your crew gets it. So that's whiskey. And for me, the metaphor of jazz is, just as what we've discussed already, how do you get from where you are to where you need to be, even in the absence of sheet music, even when things aren't written down, or maybe you've got a plan written down, but something happens and you can't follow that plan. You still have to get to where you need to be on time, in key. So that's jazz for me. And then the metaphor of leadership is, nothing happens until something happens. Nothing happens until somebody does something. Nobody eats unless somebody kills something. And even vegans have to kill a plant. But it's this moment when you decide, we're going to take action, and we're going to take action in this direction unless I get better information. But that better information had better come quickly, because we're taking action. So for me, that all fits together. But I would love to get your perspective as to how do all 3 things marry together for you.
Wow. That was so beautifully said, Galen. I hope I can come up with a cohesive way of binding all these things together. For me, whiskey, it has a completely different connotation. I'm going to tell you quite honestly, I trained for and ran my first marathon when I turned 40 years old. And honestly, I had never seriously exercised a day in my life until about 7 or 8 months before my 40th birthday, when I got a postcard in the mail from the Arthritis Foundation that said they would train me to run a marathon in my choice of Amsterdam, Dublin, or Hawaii if I just fundraised for them. And I looked at this postcard and I showed it to my wife. I said, "You think I could run a marathon?" And she looked at me and she laughed and she said, "Haha, no way." And I threw it in the recycle bin. But there was something about her laugh that actually pissed me off. And I fished the thing out of the trash and I stuck it in my pocket. And a week or 2 later, I went to the organizing meeting that the Arthritis Foundation was hosting. I didn't tell my wife I was going. I just went to it just to see what it was all about. And after it was over, I sat with the running coach who would explain that he would have a whole program. He would train us. We would run our own every day, but every weekend, I think on Saturday mornings, we would all meet at one place and we would do a long run together, and he would coach us through the whole thing. And after the meeting, I sat down with him and I said, "Can I really do this?" I said, "Look at me. I'm 40. I'm almost 40. I've never done anything like this." And he assured me that I could do it. And I came home and told my wife that I was going to run the Dublin Marathon a month after my 40th birthday. Now, the whole connection of that to whiskey is I am not a beer drinker. And as I trained, it became obvious that going to Dublin, I would need to have something to drink when we got there. And so I went to a local bar here, right near where I used to work in downtown Scottsdale. And I asked the bartender for some help, and he lined up a whole bunch of other drinks for me. And it was the Jameson Irish whiskey that turned to be the thing that I could order. I could nurse it, I could drink it, and I wouldn't look out of place sitting at an Irish pub nursing that. And so for me, the ability to drink whiskey, Irish whiskey, was synonymous with the 7 months of training that it took for me to run the Dublin Marathon. And please understand, I finished the Dublin Marathon in 6 hours, 20 minutes, and 30 seconds, which is not a land record by any way, shape, or form, except that it was my personal best. And to this day, I still think the hardest physical activity I have ever undertaken in my life. And it doesn't compare, I imagine, to my wife giving birth to our 2 children. That is so far beyond this. But for me, to run a marathon and to complete it, to finish it, was a huge accomplishment, and it set the stage for my entire career. And for me, drinking whiskey was the celebration, the necessary post-run lubricant necessary to celebrate this. And I had to earn that drink, and I earned it in the hardest physical way that I could imagine. That's my whiskey.
I love it. I love it.
So if I didn't take too long, I'll tell you jazz and leadership. I'll try to be shorter.
Please do. No,
so
go for it.
The jazz is a really easy one, because I've been using a jazz metaphor all along. I told you that it was a friend of mine, a former city manager here at Scottsdale, who told me I should take my talents and bring them into the world of working with cities and towns, and he joined me in it. So Social Prosperity Partners is me and my good friend John Little, former Scottsdale city manager. And he and I frequently facilitate together. And when we start working together with a group, what I will often say is that we are jazz artists who play off of each other. And I've never had such a seamless, complementary relationship with another human being, my wife notwithstanding, in a professional capacity. And so I also say that, we're like your tour guides. I'm the tour guide who makes sure that you get to your destination on time with all your luggage. And my partner is the tour guide who makes sure that we slow down and appreciate all the stops along the way. And we balance each other out. We make sure that we get the job done fully and on time. And I value that relationship so much. That's jazz. And then finally, for leadership, I will tell you, I'm a little older than 40 now, maybe a lot older than 40. And my whole definition of leadership has changed dramatically. In my younger days, I thought that leadership was the leadership of Captain Kirk. I'm a Star Trek fan. The leadership of Captain Kirk is you go with your gut. You stand up, you take the initiative, you take the hit, you take the shot. You're the one, you're the man, you're the one who's always making it happen. But somewhere along the line, what I've discovered is leadership is actually about making other people better. And that I have some qualities that I bring, I have some strengths, that the real strength that I bring is the ability to pass the ball to other people and let them succeed, and that I can support them, that I don't have to be the center of attention. And one of the quotes that we use often in our business and Social Prosperity Partners is, where people work together courageously, their potential is unlimited. And that's the same courage, the courage to be open-minded, the courage to be vulnerable. And my best leadership is putting other people in a place where they can be courageous, where I can facilitate the conversation and bring them together and help them together find something that's mutually beneficial and exciting and effective. And that's, to me, what leadership is in this mode.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And this sounds like one of our normal conversations that we would have when we would reconnect. So I want to run by you something that's become a mantra of mine that you reminded me of when you were talking about running the marathon. Because it just occurred to me that I would spend a lot of time trying to avoid doing the things that I didn't want to do. I would spend a lot of time, a lot of energy doing everything other than the most important thing that I know that I need to do. And so finally, it just really dawned on me, I can do hard things. And so that's become a mantra of mine right now. Do hard things. Do hard things. And I can't think of anything harder than training to run a marathon. As a matter of fact, it would be interesting for me to evaluate the creativity of the excuses that I could probably come up with why I couldn't run a marathon. But at the end of the day, we can do hard things. What's your reaction to this idea that we can do hard things? We often spend a lot of time, creativity, and energy trying to avoid doing hard things.
That is such a great point, Galen. And this is why I love you, because this is exactly the right conversation. Training for the marathon taught me that there's only two speeds. There's forward and not. And either I'm moving forward towards the 26.2 goal, or I'm not. And as long as I'm moving towards that goal at 6 hours, 20 minutes, and 30 seconds, it didn't matter whether I was running or jogging or just walking. As long as I was moving towards it, I was advancing. And I was doing just fine. There was no other expectation on me. The only thing that worked against me were those moments that I wasn't. Those moments that I thought, oh, I'll just stay in bed today and I won't do it. Or, oh, I'm a little sore. Maybe I shouldn't go today. That's not going. And so once you get your head around the idea that I'm either doing this or I'm not doing this, then the choice is simple. Are you doing it? And it doesn't matter whether it's easy or medium or hard. If you're moving towards it, you're moving towards it. And Galen, you also remind me of something else. The night before I left for that trip, my wife didn't come with me. I was with a small group, about 34 of us, I think, from Arizona, who went with the Arthritis Foundation on this trip. I sat with my son would have been 11 years old and my daughter was like 9. And I tucked him in the night before I left on this trip. I was going to be gone for like 6 days. And I said to my son, I said, you know why I'm going? Do you know why I'm doing this? And he was a little wise ass. And he said, well, because you're having a midlife crisis and mom won't let you get a sports car. Okay, so he's been watching, too much TV. I asked my daughter at 9 years old, do you know why daddy's going to do this? She said, no. I said, it's because even grown-ups need to remind themselves that they can be anything they want to be when they grow up. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I don't think that was a unique thing for turning 40. It's important for adults every day. And now when I look at birthdays and other momentous occasions, I have to remind myself, I'm not done growing up. I can still set goals and ambitions, and there is still time to have a return on that investment if I just make the decision to move forward.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.